One funny thing in George Miller's Wikipedia biography is that he is noted as being a feminist.
Feminist king, love this for me.
I've gone from being very male dominant to being surrounded by magnificent women. I can't help but be a feminist. There we go. Fucking George Miller, ally.
Only a feminist could have directed Happy Feet.
Welcome to Mortified, the Friendship Quest, a podcast where two long-distance friends bounce media recommendations, all in hopes the other will like it. I'm Aaron.
And I'm 165 Days of Salt.
And this week, witness us as we watch the 2015 action classic, Mad Max Fury Road. Before we do some wild stuff with cars, remember you can help us on Mortified the Legitimacy Quest by subscribing to us on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify, signing up for our monthly newsletter through the link in our show notes, or following us on Twitter and Tumblr at MortifiedPod. Leyla.
Aaron.
How much do you know about the Mad Max universe?
Honestly, this is the only one I've ever seen.
That's probably a good thing, considering the original Mad Max was one Mel Gibson.
No. Yeah, he was also another kind of Mad Max, which is to say the lead rooster Rocky in my other favorite film, Chicken Run.
Yeah, we'll get to Chicken Run eventually. Listen, Mel Gibson's made some films that are good, despite the fact that he is not. But we're not here to talk about Mr. Gibson. We're here to talk about his replacement, Tom Hardy, and of course, all the other wonderful characters in this film. I really started thinking that I should watch this movie around, I feel like the end of 2020, right? Because Polygon put together this big list of like best films of the decade, and like this was their number one film of the 2010s decade. And I was like, yeah,
objectively.
Listen, I saw some films, the 50 Shades series came out in 2015 also. So like, pretty big competition. However, I think that like, right, my first exposure to this was actually in The Adventure Zone when Griffin McElroy's, my favorite arc of the balance arc of The Adventure Zone is inspired by this. But like, I really just like, I'd seen so many YouTube videos and like people discussing this film and talking about it like this like incredible piece of filmmaking, and I was just so glad that we finally got around to watching it for this purpose, because it really was a great movie. But I was also very surprised at how like accessible and not like highfalutin it was. Quite the opposite, in fact. But yeah, Leyla, what's your history with this movie?
I saw it in theaters, and I've been thinking about it once a day ever since. I love Charlize Theron. I love Tom Hardy. I just realized today, because I don't think I'm face blind, but I'm not like good at faces. I just realized today, because I just watched that Nick Cage Dracula trailer, Renfield, that Renfield is the guy from Warm Bodies, and he's also Nux.
Okay, I saw you tweet about this, and I was like, sorry, what? Yeah. But like, yeah, I feel like Warm Bodies got a bad rap. I'm glad Warm Bodies guy is doing well.
I loved Warm Bodies. It was part of that like wave of teen supernatural romances.
Yeah.
I rewatched it like somewhat recently, either on a plane or like at my mom's house. It was just on. But within the last like 3 or 4 years I rewatched it. It's cute.
It is.
I'm going to stand by that. It's a cute movie.
I agree. I think it's nice. Anyway, so I don't know if you all could tell during our Avatar episode, which was a little bit more chaotic than usual.
I would call it like a trauma dump.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty raw. But like,
and
we are
everything
I've
learned since has made it worse.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's actually, we were 100% correct in all of our criticisms, and actually should have been a little bit meaner to James Cameron, but too late. But we're actually trying out a new show format. Normally we get bogged down in the characters a lot. This time we are going to try to go through the plot summary and take that a little bit slower, but also try to get to characters at that point in time. So, give us some feedback if you decide that this is, you prefer the old format, but we're going to try this out for a bit. But But without further ado, I guess it's my turn to do the plot summary.
It's going to be a much more collaborative with switch off, I think, going with this format. But yes, you take the lead in this one.
Yeah. So we get introduced to Max immediately, right? We get this like shot of a bunch of like, news headlines, right? We get the understanding and the explanation that the world has been destroyed in some sort of nuclear skirmish. And the rest of the world is just like, or at least wherever this story takes place is a big fucking desert. And we were introduced to Max, right? He is clearly having some sort of psychological, psychosocial trauma, right? He keeps having these dreams or visions of people that he couldn't save. And we kind of get this first opening shot of this big expanse of desert. And he's, in his like scavenger equipment with his broken down car. And he eats a lizard. That's very good. He is immediately captured by the minions of Immortan Joe, who is a big, like, mean warlord guy. You know how in post-apocalypses there's society's broken down, so there's a bunch of, like, warring factions. He's, what you'd expect from a big, terrible warlord in the post-apocalypse. But Max gets kidnapped by these people and turned into what is called a blood bag. Because Max apparently has, universal donor blood, which I believe is type O. He is able to, he's very valuable. They keep him alive for that reason. And they basically hook him up to a kid named Nux, who is part of the cult of war boys, which are basically like, young men raised from birth to like, wear all this like white paint and, live their lives in service to Joe. Sort of like a weird warrior cult sort of deal. There's a lot of stuff that gets brought up in the film about them drawing a lot from Viking mythology specifically. They hope to die and go to Valhalla, where everything is shiny and chrome. And Nux is at a bit of a disadvantage. We find out that he's sick for some reason. He gets in a fight with his...
All the war boys are sick. Okay,
I did not get that. Could you explain why all the war boys are sick?
So basically, the whole thing with Immortan Joe and the whole plot of this movie is him chasing his wives. And it is that he wants heirs that are healthy. Because in the Citadel, basically everyone is dying of basically cancer.
Radiation poisoning, right?
Everyone has, even while Furiosa is driving the war rig in like the first act of the movie, before they catch on that she's maybe not following Immortan Joe's orders and going rogue a little bit, you can tell like when the guy, I know your TV was like being weird while...
my TV looked like this film was shot on the surface of Mars. It was so red. I still enjoyed it immensely, but I don't know if it was the YouTube edit or my TV, but like it looked so...
Is that why you're wearing a red hoodie?
Yes.
In solidarity?
Like honestly, it looked about the same shade as my hoodie. It was unfortunate, but it was red.
Well, when that war boy turns his head, and most of them like turn their heads, like their necks are just covered in lumps.
I see. I did not notice that.
So they are all dying. That's what they mean when they refer to Nux's half-life. They're all living half-lives. So that's why they're so eager to throw themselves into battle, because they think that instead of living a miserable half-life and dying slowly, Immortan Joe will dying for him will take them to Valhalla, where everything is, as you said, shiny and chrome.
Okay, that makes sense, and that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clearing that up. But yeah, so, but Nux in particular, I feel like he's a little bit weaker than the other ones. They talk about him not being able to walk, which is not true. He's able to walk, but, he gets in this fight with his Lancer, but eventually he's like, no, I'm going to take, Max here, because he's feral. He's got all this crazy blood in him, and that's going to make me strong. And his Lancer's like, yeah, sure, hell yeah, let's go. So Max is strapped to the front of a car. His blood is going into Nux, right? He is chained to Nux, Max's neck to Nux's wrist. But the reason that they are all going out onto this convoy that you mentioned is because allegedly Immortan Joe needs to trade with people from Gastown and the Bullet Farms, and he's got a bunch of mother's milk. Which we'll explain in a second. But it's exactly what you think it sounds like. It is what you think it is, and it's gross. But like, Right. So that's the ruse, right? They're going out on this convoy to go trade and do whatever, do the barter economy of the post apocalypse. But Furiosa has agreed to hide the wives of Immortan Joe. Basically women that he's captured to, make heirs with, against their will. And she is trying to save them, take them to her hometown, the place that's green, or the green place. That's her whole deception. She's surrounded by enemies, but they don't know, because she's an Imperator, which is essentially like a general. And like that's the whole crux of the situation. That's why we get Max, Nux, Furiosa, and the wives all on the same car, or in the same proximity.
Yes, so
they're not in the car yet.
We should take like a little character and world building break, because like even this opening 15 minutes is like packed with information.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about our friend Max? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about him in this? He goes through a pretty broad character arc.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a completely fine and good character arc, right? He starts out as a selfish survivor. He is traumatized. He meets some people, and he's like, I gotta defend myself. I gotta look out for them. He tries to, eventually, betray all the women, or at least, screw them over. But over time, he grows to like them. Furiosa earns his respect. They protect each other. In the end, he sacrifices his blood to save her. Right. I think it's a very good character arc. It's simple and straightforward, and gets the job done. Actually, it makes me feel a lot better about my own writing when I do also have kind of simple character arcs. None of my characters, I think, are especially complex. And I like that, because Max is also pretty straightforward, and I like that about him.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's Tom Hardy being this kind of gruff. I think my favorite, like, little thing about Max is that he loves to give a little commentary. He spends a lot of the movie grunting, but like when he's strapped to the front of that car with Nux, he's like, they took my jacket and my car. What else are they going to take from me? Like, all right, settle down.
He's like like spears are whizzing by his head, and he's like, please be careful.
That's my head.
Yes.
I love him. And then we get introduced to, Nux, like you said, he's pretty frail. He's like the runt of the litter, basically. Mm-hmm. But he wants to die historic on the Fury Road. Like, that's the War Boys kind of like rallying cry.
Specifically, I think he's a comic crazy. Is that the like class of warrior he is?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, they have polecats, they have flamers, they have a bunch of, like, cool, stupid post-apocalypse names, which I love, but I think he is specifically the class of warrior that wants to, drive a car and explode themselves.
Yeah, which brings me to, like, talking about the world building in this a little bit, which is, like, in this, like, I think it's one of the best handlings of post-apocalyptic society, because their like, language is, it's, like, words we use carelessly, stripped of all their context and meaning, right? Like, mm-hmm. Comic crazy and kamikaze aren't even in the same realm, mm-hmm. because it's just like, yeah, these are like things that the old society said, stripped of their context, stripped of their history, and it's just like what we're using now.
Yep. Gasoline is pronounced guzzling. Yeah. Right. Everything has like this like 80s like blown out, like completely over the top pronunciation. At one point, somebody yells at Nux, "You traitor," to him, referring to Joe, and it's like I just like that way. It's like, yeah, language has evolved in a weird, stupid way. It's very fun,
and they balance out that like real simplicity of world building and saying like, this is the Citadel, this is the green place. They want to go from the Citadel bad to the green place good, with words like comic crazy, right? So mm-hmm. It's just like the important concepts that you need to know, like what is a war rig, exactly what it sounds like, big truck, big spikes, big engine. They balance out like that simplicity with words like comic crazy, which you don't like need to understand what that means. It's just kind of a vibe.
If you speak English, you understand what they're getting at.
Exactly. So, and did we bring up any other characters? Oh, and Furiosa herself. I just love Charlize.
I mean, Charlize Theron's great, right? She's been in a Fast and Furious movie, right?
Yeah, she's Cypher.
She's Cypher, right? Yeah. So we're already big fans of her and all her when she's evil. It's nice to be able to root for her. And
you're not rooting for Cypher?
Listen,
I'm rooting for Cypher a little.
Cypher did shoot Elena straight in the head in front of her kid.
Fair
like, it's not great. Anyway, but like, she has this. She's like missing her left hand, I believe. So she has this cool like mechanical arm, which is really neat. You know, she's completely shaved bald. She looks like she's just like this cool like post-apocalyptic general, and I think that rules.
It does rule. And she also. She's great. We'll get to why she's great. I love this character very, very much. So we were talking about the first battle is where we stopped.
Right. So what happens here? Basically, it's revealed. You know, Joe has this like cool like tower, right? And he's got people like watching the convoy, and they see that she makes this left turn away from Gastown. And then Joe's like, oh shit. He goes and checks on his wives. His wives are all gone. Only their caretakers left, who, you know, tries to kill him, fails.
Gosh, she fucking rules.
She's great too. He pretty quickly pieces together that they're, you know, his general has betrayed him and is going to try to take his wives away. So he, you know, rallies his forces. He gets his big, you know, his armada. And like, if you know anything about Mad Max Fury Road, you know this shit, which is like all the stupid post-apocalypse cars. There's like a big car with a bunch of like speakers, and there's a guy playing a guitar that shoots fire out of it. Like, that's the shit, you know, and it's really, really cool and good. And like he basically gets this big, you know, convoy out and starts following Furiosa. And they have this battle, right? And in this battle, what's his name? Max and Nux are like going ahead. Nux believes that he is going to die gloriously against this Furiosa. So he pulls the steering wheel off of his car, I believe, and, you know, just like charges forward. And that's how they like get up. There's a bunch of cool like action sequences, and Furiosa, you know, shows that she's a badass. But to escape the convoy, as well as like all the other war boys who realize that their general has turned, she drives into this huge wall of sand, which is like, you've posted this on Twitter, just an incredible shot. Just so cool to watch her drive into the sandstorm. The sandstorm, inside the sandstorm itself, is awesome because there's like lightning coming down, and it's the first time that like you see it change from like that orange dry color to like there's more blue. It's a really, really neat. But in this whole debacle, you know, Nux does not succeed in his glorious attempt at death. Instead, he crashes the car. I don't remember exactly how, but basically they get enough distance away from Joe's forces that they can, like, you know, the war rig has to stop. But Max is not killed. The Nux's car is destroyed, but Max is still like alive. He gets up. He is still attached to Nux, so he has to carry him. And he walks to the war rig where he threatens them with a gun, eventually takes over the war rig, and he's like, all right, I'm out of here. You know, they at this point they've broken the chain, right? They break it so he is not physically attached to Nux anymore.
Yes, and he gets in the war rig and he makes it 100 feet. Yeah,
and I just like that because Furiosa knows what's about to happen, and she's like, "Hey, all you other wives, just pick up what you can and run." And then like Max just kind of like sadly sitting at the steering wheel, like, "Well, I'm just gonna sit here then. Fuck you guys." And then they convince him like, "Hey, you kind of shot one of his favorite wives." Like he cut one of their what's her name? And Herod, yeah, my favorite, with this
Queen.
Yeah, R.I.P. Shoots her axe, like his warning shot cuts her leg. So Furiosa's like, you've wounded one of his wives. He also sucks generally. You'll probably remember that from the time he used you as a blood bag. He's not gonna be grateful for this if you turn us over. Why don't you just come and help us? And Max is like, fucking fine, all right. And so,
well, that's not what convinces him. What convinces him is she goes, you want that fucking cage off your face?
Oh, yes, that's a good point. Correct. Because at this point, he still has the cage. It's just like the chain has been cut. But he still has this big like muzzle on him. But yeah, at this point, you know, he begrudgingly accepts Furiosa's help. They all get in. There's another sequence where they have to go into this like narrow passage where they have to she's negotiated some sort of treaty with a biker gang that they're going to let them through if she gives them like 3,000 gallons of gasoline. Guzzling, sorry. Thank you. But they pretty immediately are like, hey, you said there would be a couple people in pursuit. That's everyone. Because at this point, Joe has called reinforcements from the Bullet Farms and from Gastown. And like, so there's just a huge army chasing after her. And she's like, yeah, I don't know, let us through. And they turn on them, you know. This is the point where she's like, because Max hasn't told her his name yet, so she tells him, like, when I yell fool, you drive the car. So she yells, fool, now. They start going, you know, they escape the biker gang. There's a big explosion with that tank of gasoline that collapses that narrow pass, so it gives them a little bit more time to, you know, escape the horde, or what's his name? Yeah, Joe's horde.
This is one of my favorite sequences in the whole flick, because Max is, I think, like you said earlier, is like very distrustful of Furiosa and the wives. Mm-hmm. So his first thing that he does in the passenger seat while he's like trying to saw off the head cage is he starts gathering all the guns and all the bullets, and there are so many guns.
We love that sequence. Yeah.
There's like Furiosa's packing. Like there are guns under seats, behind seats, in roofs, and hidden compartments. They're like one by Furiosa's hand, one like near the sun. It is so many guns
hidden in a skull outside the car. When I was like at first watching this in the first battle, I was like, a lot of these guys just have like, you know, fire bombs taped to spears. Like, are there not that many guns in this film? And then I was immediately like, oh no, there's a bajillion guns in this movie.
And Furiosa has all the guns.
Yeah.
So he starts collecting all the guns, and he like won't let anybody else use one. But that builds to like one of my favorite, like as we keep going in this battle sequence, it builds up to like one of my favorite, kind of like Max learning to trust Furiosa, which is like him handing her guns and reloading guns for her. And like that is the beginning of their teamwork, and it's so beautifully choreographed. It's like one of my favorite, because there's no dialogue. They're just like learning to trust each other on the fly, and it's poetry. This movie is incredible.
Another important character point comes a little bit after this, because so Nux has been kind of abandoned, right? He was left in the dirt. He tried to, you know, take out Furiosa, but they eventually threw him off the thing. Eventually he goes back to Joe. He catches up with the army, and he has like a scrap of the wives' clothes. So Joe is like, okay, you can come with me. And like there's a bit where they're trying to catch up, and you know, Joe allows him to, you know, do this attack and try to kill Furiosa. He gives him his own revolver actually, and tells Nux to kill Furiosa, and he's all psyched. He does the thing where he spray paints his mouth with chrome.
I cried during this because he is so desperate to, not like a full sob, but there were tears.
Yeah.
He's so desperate to please Joe. Or Joe tells him, I will carry you to Valhalla myself. And he goes, am I awaited? With all the like earnestness and desperation of a puppy. Like it is the most desperate thing I've ever heard in my life. And he goes, you will ride eternal, shiny and chrome. And I was like, wow. And then in contrast to what fucking actually happens.
Then he like immediately like falls off the car, loses the gun, and Joe's just like, ugh, mediocre.
Which is, hey, they said that when another one of the war boys dies. That's just like a thing they say if it's not an epic enough of a death.
Right. And like this guts him. Nux is ruined at this, and like later one of the wives finds him like hiding in the war rig, and she's like, hey, what are you doing here? And he's just like, Joe saw me fuck up so bad. I'm fucked. There's nothing for me. And she's like, hey bud, maybe you could hang out with us and not want to destroy yourself in a big fiery explosion.
Yeah, so a good point at which to talk about the wives. There are 5 of them.
Right.
So the one that finds Nux, and they have a little romance arc, it's actually very sweet, is Capable.
Right.
Capable is red hair. She is capable.
Did she? I could not tell.
Oh, well, yeah,
because of my movie. Yeah.
Yeah, Capable is bright red hair. On purpose, not just your screen.
Right.
The most pregnant of the wives is Angharad, and she's your fave.
She's great. She's kind of a badass.
She rules. She does die.
She gets run over pretty soon. I think right at the second bit, right? I think it's in the second battle.
Yes.
She is like shielding because they don't want to shoot the wives. So she is like putting her body in front of Furiosa to like prevent them from getting a shot on her. And just like there's a bit where like there's like a rock or something and she like gets knocked off the car. And then, Joe's own car runs her over. And he there's a bit where he's like trying to save the child, and the doctor's just like, oh man, sucks, dude, this would have been a completely healthy baby boy, but you shit the bed. And that's also where we get one of my favorite characters, Rictus, who is actually Joe's son, right? He's like the warlord.
Joe has a lot of sons.
He has a lot of sons, but he's like the one in line, right?
Yes.
He's the one without any disabilities. Well, the thing about Rictus is that he's stupid.
He is so stupid. He's not. I mean, like that's the thing, though. No, but he is also. I think he also has the like cancer.
Oh, okay. I did not know
that's the thing, is like Joe wants a healthy heir.
Yes, I could see that, but like I couldn't tell why, except for I just thought he thought Rictus was too stupid to lead, which is true.
It's true.
Because he's a fucking dumbass.
He's a blockhead.
There's a part where like when the third act where they're turning around and he's just like, Are they gonna surrender? Sick. It's just like, oh no, you complete dunce. But yeah, that we get a lot of like, we don't get a whole lot of what's going on with Joe, but like we get enough that we get his motivations and understand why he is so obsessed with the wives and wants them back so badly, and I think that's interesting.
Right.
But yeah, so that's Angharad and unfortunately her death, but she rules.
Rip to a queen. There's Dag. Dag is very, very pale, very, very blonde, and she's like the most spiritual of the group. She actually says a little prayer at some point, and Toast, badass queen who
she's the gun lady, yeah.
She gets to count the bullets. Toast is like, to whom's? And Dag is like, whoever's listening.
Yeah.
And then there's Cheeto, coward queen, who uses her cowardice as a weapon.
Yes, right. At first, she does genuinely want to go back to Joe, and then they have to talk her down after Herod's death. But later on in the third battle, she'll be like, "Oh no, please save me!" She runs back to the war boys and then uses that to like distract them, and then like betrays them and helps kill Rictus. Or no, Rictus survives, so defeat Rictus.
Yes. So that's the first battle, and it ends well, but it's not the end of their fucking journey. Right,
because at this point they get to the swamp, and like this is a minor battle, but like the swamp is cool just because it's like dark and moody. It's all blue. Like my screen went completely like navy, which was fun. I was like, oh, that's a nice change. But I really liked the swamp sequence where like, there's only one car that could go after them, and they have like this cool sniper fight, and Furiosa like Max lets Furiosa lean the last, the sniper rifle on him so she could take the final shot.
Yeah, so they have 4 bullets for the sniper rifle, according to Toast, who did a great job counting. Mm-hmm. And he took 3 shots, and then Furiosa just gets behind him and doesn't say anything. He hands her the gun, and she leans it on his shoulder and says, "Don't breathe." Like, it's one of those just, like, incredible moments between them. It's so good.
Yeah, it's great. But yeah, they're able to. There's this stupid like minion guy who's like one of the leaders of one of the other towns, and shows up, and they like shoot the spotlight on his car, and it shatters and like blinds him. And then he just drives straight at them, shooting his Heckler and Kochs, just doing this like completely bananas like spiel about how he's like the scales of justice or some dumb shit.
He is the scales of justice. He is conductor of the choir of death.
Right. That's like exactly kind of what I want from a movie like this. It's just completely over the top villainy. And then at that point, like they kind of get away, and then Max turns around. He's like, I'll be right back. And then there's just an explosion, and he comes back, and one of them is like, "Oh, are you hurt? You're bleeding." And Furiosa's like, "That's not his blood." So good.
Hey, Max is a resourceful guy. He comes back with bullets. He comes back with stuff for Nux, a steering wheel because they lost the steering wheel to the war rig.
Steering wheel.
I love this. It's an incredible sequence.
It's really good. And we'll get to that swampland again eventually, because they get through the swampland, they get to a place that Furiosa recognizes. They meet the Vuvalini, which is a clan of like basically old biker ladies. Apparently, Furiosa and her mom were taken from these people a long time, about 19 years ago, and she returns to them, and she's like, "Thank you for letting me in. I missed you all so much. We're heading to the green place. Where's the green place?" And they're like, "Oh, you just drove through it. It was the swamp." And then she's just like devastated. It's brutal.
Yeah, because the water that they had at the swamp turned to acid and ruined the green place, so they had to leave. And the shot of Furiosa finding this out is one of my favorite shots in all of cinema, period, hands down. I think about it constantly. And that's not like, I'm not exaggerating or like being a joker. Just sometimes I will be thinking about cool compositions and I'm like, damn, that shot from Fury Road, I still think about it all the time. It's this wide shot on nothing but the desert, and like the horizon is barely cut with like some mountains, and it's just Charlize Theron on her knees screaming in the middle of this wide, and it's so isolated and so lonely and so heartbreaking. And there's this beautiful score, and the scoring for this movie is we haven't like talked about it yet, but there's I don't know who scored this movie. I Wish to Kiss Them. It's great. The soundtrack here is everything to me. And that's even before the guitar guy at the work. Because some of the scoring is diegetic. They have drummers and guitarists in the war parties.
There's a bit like the third fight where like the guitarist and Max get into a fight, and like the guitarist is nearly killed, but he doesn't. And as soon as he gets the guitar back, he continues playing, and the soundtrack resumes. It's really, really good. It rules.
So, whoa, what are they going to do now?
At this point, they have some bikes. They're like, okay, we're gonna keep heading this direction. Max, you can come with us if you want. But Max is like, no, I'll go make my own way. But as they leave, he has a change of heart. He realizes he does have an opportunity to save some people, to atone for the things that the people he hasn't been able to save. He stops them. He's like, hey, I've been out there before. It's all salt. There's nothing green out there, but you have a really good chance at planting something. One of the Vuvalini has a bag of seeds, a lot of seeds that they've kept from the green place. And he's like, there is one place with a lot of water, and it's the Citadel. And they're like, you want us to go back there? And he's like, well, all of them are out here chasing us. So if we go back through that narrow pass, we could probably beat them back and take over the Citadel. And they're like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's going to suck ass, but we'll do it. And they turn around. Basically they have this big final battle. They try to, they make it through that narrow passage, but it is, a truly like gripping and like climactic fight. Like I was so tense the entire time watching it. There's bits where like, people get like chainsaws are just like tearing at people. People are shooting like spear guns and harpoons. The polecats at one point pick one of the wives up and bring them back into the car. Like it is a truly like really well done and intense action scene. And like, I was just really, really impressed with it. But it ends with, Nux, who has kind of, been learning about how to be, emotional labor and doing the dishes and not always having to be the center of attention. Instead, maybe supporting the women in your life. He decides that, okay, he's going to help everybody out. He plays a very good supporting role. But in the end, he does what he set out to do at the beginning, which is he does die in a big fiery explosion. But this time it is to stall all of the army of Joe coming back to the pass. He flips the war rig so it collapses, explodes, and the rocks come down, and they can't get back through that narrow pass. And he buys them enough time to escape back to the Citadel, where they they're able to get there. Furiosa is pretty badly hurt during this fight, but because of Max being a universal donor, he hooks himself back up to her. And gives her blood.
Max is doing backseat surgery.
Oh yeah, she has a pneumothorax at one point, so he has to like puncture a hole on the other side of her ribs to even out the air pressure. At one point in time, I probably would have known what that was, but that's all I remember. But that is a thing that you do if you have a collapsed lung, is they have to puncture another hole to even out the air pressure, which is very weird. But it's very cool and like hard to watch, but it's a really interesting sequence. Really cool stuff. But yeah, they make it to the Citadel, and now it's just a bunch of like really young war boys. It's like they call them war pups. Yeah, in the captions. But yeah, at this point, they're just like, we'll let him up, because like they bring Joe's body and they throw him on the floor of the Citadel. And I didn't mention this, but like everybody in the Citadel hates Joe because he rations water to them.
Well, they'll get addicted to it if they have too much.
Yeah, so that's an incredible line of characterization. He's like, do not grow addicted to water, or else you'll resent its absence. Like, fuck off, right? Like, obviously, like such a terrible villainous thing to do. And like, so they show Joe's body. All the people in the Citadel are super psyched. There's like 3 dudes left with guns, and they're like, yeah, I guess we're not going to kill every single person here to maintain our dead warlord's, presence. They lift Furiosa and the rest of the wives up on the car, and Max disappears into the crowd. And that's how the movie ends. It's really, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and I love when like because the last thing Max does, and him and Furiosa just like nod at each other, and like same thing with Hank Herod. Like right before she dies, he like looks at her in the side view mirror, and she looks to him for approval, and he kind of nods. God, it's just like such an incredible piece of storytelling, because it is somehow a big, sweeping, blockbuster road trip adventure movie. But when you do your character work, all of it happens in the war rig or around the war rig. So it's also kind of a bottle episode. It's insane. Mm-hmm. It is like me and you, while I was at visiting your apartment, which again, thank you for having me. It was a delightful time. Mm-hmm. We watched Glass Onion, and like an insane directional choice that Rian Johnson makes. Mild structural spoilers for Glass Onion is that all of Act 2 is a flashback that then catches up to the present. So I think this is another one of those like formatting things that I just adore.
Yeah, no, it's very smart, right? It is a very economical movie, right? It is barely over 2 hours long, and that includes credits, right? All the like characterization and conversations like have a point, right? Even like the conversation between the wife and the Vuvolini who has the seeds, like that kind of like sets up her character, and like they have this little story arc about hope and trying to survive, and like it is all really well done, and smart, and just like they don't waste time in this movie. They just kind of like do everything that needs to be done, and I have to respect that.
Yeah, one of my favorite films of all time, so I'm really glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, we figured so we were actually going to play or talk about Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion today, but that game is very long, so we decided to push that back a little bit so we can play, have more time to play it. And I was like, okay, Leyla, we can watch 2 movies. We can watch Mad Max, or we can watch the Super Mario Brothers movie from 1990. And then I was like, we can't do 2 terrible movies in a row. So yeah. I'm very glad we watched a good one that was, historic and like an instant classic, and, just a really, testament to the form.
Though as far as I understand it, Super Mario Brothers isn't actually a bad movie so much as it's just like kind of like the Muppets Sex and Murder, or Sex and Violence, sorry, where it's just like a children's thing intended for adults, and it was like wildly mismarketed and stuff. So I'm excited for us to eventually get to that flick. But God, I just like, it is so nice to watch something and like remember why I went to film school.
Yeah. I think that's completely fair, right? Like they're taking such big swings, and I know that the Match universe has like already been set up, right? So they didn't have to do all this world building from whole cloth. But like for our generation, right, that like never watched another Mad Max movie, it was 30 years since the first Max movie came out, when this film debuted, right? They were essentially, playing to a fresh, tabula rasa. So I think they really do a good job of just like setting up like kind of what the world is and what you should expect, and like how to manage your expectations, and just like kind of vibe with what the movie is putting out there.
Yeah, I am famously lukewarm on revivals and remakes and etc. Some of them I think work really well, and then some of them I think are just like heartless cash grabs. Kind of depends on what you're trying to make. But in terms of like when a revival or a remake works really well, one of the things I'm kind of obsessed with is how it onboards a new audience to an old piece of world building. And like I think this does a really good job, like you said, of just like introducing the world of Mad Max to a new audience. And not in a way where like I felt obligated to go back and watch the rest of the Mel Gibson Mad Max movies, to get more context on the universe. And it's like, it's the same way I feel about like Breath of the Wild, where, listen, hey, I would love to play the older Zeldas. They make me motion sick. I've tried. Like, it's that like camera switchy thing. I can't do it. The angles are too much. Like, it makes me genuinely ill. But, the way Breath of the Wild kind of onboards the player, this is a fun phrase I learned at work, the FTUI, the first time user experience, right? And the way that, like, it introduces the world to you through Link, who is established, but in this iteration is, like, an amnesiac, I think is like a really smart move. And so, like, I love to see, like, the mechanics of like a good revival. And I think this really did like a great job.
Another point of comparison that I think makes sense is the 7th Star Wars movie, right? Because that also came out in 2015. And I think that, like,
God, really?
Yeah. Right. I think this is like the start of our current quagmire, right? I'm sure there were more, but like I think this is probably really this, like, let's just bring everything back from the last 30, 40 years and see if we can't do it again and make more money off of it. But like, in particular, right, I think that when we're comparing the world building of like a Star Wars to a Mad Max, right, Star Wars is a lot easier to do just because, one, it's a Disney property at this point. So Disney has a lot of resources to help you like get back into that mode. Two, Star Wars has been memed to death. So like if you're a part of an internet savvy culture, also, the Star Wars prequels came out much more recently than Mad Max did, right? So it's much easier to onboard an audience to what Star Wars is. They didn't have to do as much, retreading ground. But J.J. Abrams, as much as I like that 7th movie, like basically just does the episode 4 again, right? And I think that is, in many ways, a mark against that film, because they could have tried to take it in a new weird experience and try to do something different. And like, it is all just like recapturing, that old nostalgia, but just like with new 3D, or not 3D, but like, new
shiny
technology,
new CGI, right? Yeah.
Correct, right. Whereas like I can't say that Mad Max Fury Road isn't, borrowing so much from its predecessors. I have no idea. But right, we were not primed, like I'm not primed as an audience to like that kind of that world the way I'm primed to go into Star Wars. But I still think that Fury Road like is really easily able to get me on by doing like what we said earlier, like doing world building in like short spurts of like, here's a word that you can kind of get the context of, but like you don't need the full explanation for, right? You get that there's a weird cult around, the War Boys, even though like as we saw in this episode, I didn't fully understand their purpose. Like you kind of get what's going on there. Right. You get the big stupid cars that are full of spikes, right? At one point there's a bunch of like Russian gangsters that show up. Right.
I think they were actual Russians. I could understand what they were saying.
There you go. Right. They actually got real Russians this time.
For longtime listeners, you guys know that like, the lack of Russian language accent coaches in Hollywood drives me up a fucking wall. No respect for the language.
Yeah.
No, but you're like 100% right. And I think actually when we talk about Oblivion, because I think the framing that we want to take with Oblivion is just like, how does it hold up? How is it in terms of like an introduction to a very old, like long running franchise at this point? And I think it's going to be interesting as like a point of comparison, because I'm like most of the way through the Siege of Quatch. I keep wanting to say kvass, which is a drink that tastes like dirt, which, if you know me at all, you know that that's my favorite kind of drink. It's a Russian, like, rye soda, I think. But kvatch. And, like, me and you kind of have a cheat code when it comes to Elder Scrolls, and that cheat code is my friend Marty.
One friend of the podcast, Marty, who I had a long conversation with about Elder Scrolls lore today.
Yeah,
Marty.
They are a fucking historian. They're incredible. So, like, if I need to know who Tiber Septim is, like, I can just ask Marty. But I think that's going to be an interesting point of comparison, just in terms of, like, how do the mechanics interact with that story? How do they support the story? And then how is it in terms of, like, onboarding the audience onto the Elder Scrolls, because that's kind of why Skyrim didn't work for me. It doesn't really do a good job of onboarding an audience to the Elder Scrolls. It was like my first Elder Scrolls. And then I think at some point you and I have talked about doing, this is kind of like a meta episode. We're talking about future programming.
Yeah.
Happy New Year. At some point you and I did talk about doing a Final Fantasy X episode. Because I just finished replaying it, and you got stuck in a bathroom singing the hymn at some point.
Yeah, also in 2015. 2015 was in many ways, like, my last, like, good, innocent year. Big, hugely important video game for me.
Right, but, that is also another interesting point of comparison, just in terms of, like, the Final Fantasies all kind of take place in a vaguely the same world. But are not connected or dependent on each other for story. So I think it's an interesting theme we're going to kind of coincidentally be exploring this year.
Yeah. So I hope that, I do hope we are able to do interesting and weird conversations this year, and I think this is a great place to start. But I am wondering, Leyla, in our marketing minute as we wrap this episode up, I like a lot of the stuff about Mad Max. I think they do the post-apocalypse. I mean, it's still rusty and sand-filled, and there's, generic raiders, like, bunches of, bad guys with cobbled-together outfits with, murder on their minds. But I still think that in this film, they made it a very interesting presentation of the post-apocalypse, because it's all, like, batshit 80s pizzazz. And I'm wondering, if we were going to make a post-apocalyptic film or setting, right, how would we make that interesting, right? And for me, right, like, Fallout is kind of an example, although the ways in which Fallout has been deployed lately are a little bit underwhelming. Not that I don't like Fallout, but there's a lot of criticisms with 4. But, like, what is a fun way that we can make a spin on the post-apocalypse?
It's a good question. So, like, my first instinct kind of lands us in the Ready Player One zone.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Which is not a zone I'm all that interested in exploring. I think I'm going to think out loud and probably edit most of it out. I think the interesting part about the Mad Max world is that it's very, like, men ruin the world.
Mm-hmm. One funny thing in George Miller's Wikipedia biography is that he is noted as being a feminist.
Feminist king, love this for me.
I've gone from being very male dominant to being surrounded by magnificent women. I can't help but be a feminist. There we go. Fucking George Miller, ally.
Only a feminist could have directed Happy Feet.
Correct.
So what if Gaslight Girl Boss Gatekeep Apocalypse?
Say more.
Well, I'm just trying to spin off of Mr. Mad Max here. Mm-hmm. But if that is a male-caused apocalypse, what if we girl boss too hard?
Interesting. What if women ruined the world? How do you think that happens?
That's a great question. I can't conceptualize that because women have never made mistakes.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Ever. Mm-hmm. Well, here's what I do picture. You know how the language involved in Mad Max? I do picture us talking in, like, wine bottle slogans.
Okay.
Like the whole, like, oh God, you know what I'm talking about. The fucking pillows and shit from TJ Maxx, like the corny
white
Live, lady
laugh,
memes.
Love. Yes, there's a cult of live, laugh, love. Okay,
there's a cult of living,
on.
laughing, and loving. Toxic positivity. Everything is falling around apart you. Everything's on fire, and you are just like, this is fine. Live, laugh, love, girl boss, gatekeep, gaslight. We're not gonna let.
Oh my god, this rules. This would be a great. Oh my god, right? Like all the like, if you tinkle while you sprinkle, be a CD, wipe the CD.
Yes,
that's like a whole separate religion at this point.
They just talk in those aphorisms. Yeah.
Oh my god, this rules. That's really good.
Yeah. Okay. So this is our sandbox.
Holy shit. That's great. Okay. I don't think I could top that.
I want the interior decorating to be so visually overstimulating that it's hard to look at.
Right. Yes. No, it is all like bright pastels. Right. It is the complete opposite of like this sandy, washed out, colorless wasteland. It is all just completely neon and bright and smothering in its toxic positivity.
Yeah, and like instead of being taught just to like normal handwriting, everybody gets taught that fucking what is her name?
It's not Lisa Frank, is it?
It's not fucking Lisa Frank, though. Oh my god, I know her name. What is it? It's like Rachel Zoe. Everyone writes in that like long handwritten Rachel Zoe handwriting. Like that's the only thing that's allowed, or like that like bubbly cursive.
That's very fun. I like that.
This is my post-apoc world.
No, I love I love girl bossing the apocalypse. That's really fun. I want, maybe that's what the Barbie movie is gonna be like.
Oh, I hope so.
We'll see, Greta Gerwig. We'll watch out for you,
Miss Greta. That trailer thrills me. I can't wait.
Yeah, can't wait. That'll be something. Oh God, Leyla, when we are not inventing the most interesting post-apocalypse mankind has ever seen, girlkind has ever seen, where can we be found on the internet?
You can find me at LEYLSES on Twitter and Tumblr. I am, believe it or not, actually slowly working on my webcomic. Like, I have posted some outfit tests. I am working on some stuff.
Let's fucking go.
My pitch for Astral Heart is if you've ever wanted to see 4 different phases of my depression all simultaneously try to help each other out by being ported into some fucking blorbos, that's it's just therapy, the comic, really. But it also like functions like it's kind of inspired by Kingdom Hearts, kind of inspired by like anime. It's just like vibey magic shoujo romance. It's great. Come read it, I guess, when I start publishing it. And I also have decided to pivot my social media presence in the new year a little bit. I'm going to just talk about things I like more often. So less takes, more bakes is the motto for 2023.
Hell yeah.
What about you, Aaron?
You can find me on Twitter at AaronSXO, where I tweet about tabletop RPGs, health policy, and writing. I also have a YouTube channel that's at AA Voigt on YouTube. Just released an episode or a video about The Test of High Sorcery by Kiana Shaw and Jonathan Fry, which is a choose your own adventure module, which was very interesting. Gave me a lot of big Goosebumps vibes, which I had a good time with. Yeah, and anything else, you can just find me at aavoigt.com. That's where you basically the main one where I post all my other socials and essays and shit. So check me out there. I also do another podcast with my friends, Michael and Josh. That's at The Bible Boys. Michael is moving to New York. So we've been on hiatus for a bit, but we're hoping to get back into the swing of things once he settles in. But yeah, check that out for weird Christian media takes. Our theme song is Obsolete by Keshko from the album Filmmakers Reference Kit Volume 2. You can find more of their music at keshko.bandcamp.com. Leyla, how should we end this episode?
Well, we can end it when you witness me die historic on the Fury Road.
We'll see you all next week.